Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Chicken Box, where your hosts, multi-generational, discuss what's going on in the world, what's going on in Black news and Black media, because we are the Black Media Authority. Today, I'm here with one of my favorite coworkers, Miss Aria Brent. She's a graduate of the Jackson State University, and she is very proud to be with us today. Okay, you representing? I didn't see that. Okay, period. And today we're going to interview a very special guest. Her name is Cherron, because it is Cannabis Week. Cherron is the co-founder of the Diasporic Alliance of Cannabis Opportunities and Black Cannabis Week. And so it's a Philadelphia-based gathering to encourage entrepreneurship, wellness, and innovation. So welcome, Cherron.
Thank you.
Yes.
And good afternoon to everyone who is tuning in today.
Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. I would like to start with the first question, if that's okay, Aria. I was just going to ask about how you found your journey into cannabis and specifically the Black community within that field.
Yeah. First of all, my background is in sales and marketing, and my marketing company, we're responsible for working with brands to really get them shelf space in places like Whole Foods and health food stores throughout the area. So many of my first clients were actually hemp based clients. So that were from Canada and that were from India. And so when the Farm Bill Act passed in February of 2018, I believe it was February of 2018, I started to look farther into cannabis because I only really knew cannabis as something that was bad, something that would, get you locked up, something that you just really didn't want to be around. However, being connected with the wellness side, I also knew of the health components in of it. So when that Farm Bill Act passed, it really clicked for me. I started reading more, learning more, and one of the things that I learned was so much of what we had been told was actually untrue. That, again, when we're talking about the wellness implications, when we're talking about the social justice implications, I mean, many of these people were locked up for things that had been traditional resources of revenue, income in their family growing up. I know people whose family sold cannabis and put them through college and bought houses and bought cars, not in a very showy or fancy way, but in a way that this is my job, this is what I do. It just happens to be illegal here in the United States. But that Farm Bill Act, again, it really opened my eyes and made me start to read and realize that this is actually something that our country and our communities, but specifically the Black community, could actually benefit from the some of the economic revenue that was flowing, that's starting to flow in now. And so when I looked at it that way, it just only made sense to put my wellness activities and my social justice activities together. And so now being able to share this information with community so that they can understand that the cannabis that we were told, and they didn't even call it cannabis, they call it marijuana, and that too was a ploy to turn something that was positive into something that was negative. And so understanding that in our community that there is a huge stigma, and understanding that we needed to now start educating our communities about many of these opportunities and what cannabis really is and what it is used for.
That's very true. And I noticed here that you're saying cannabis, you also referenced marijuana, but you didn't say weed. I wanted to know if there's a specific reason for that. I know that it does have a more negative connotation. So, um, yeah, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so a lot of times, a lot of state programs, and I'm here in Pennsylvania. I live in Philadelphia, and we have what they call a medical marijuana program. So by law, they are really required to call it marijuana. By science, which I just recently finished a cannabis MBA. And in science, it is called cannabis. And so, again, I think that just trying to stereotype this plant from moving away from the scientific name to now a more common name of marijuana or weed or ganja or whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's cannabis. And I know for a lot of people have heard of hemp, a lot of people have heard of CBD. It's cannabis. And this is a plant that can actually be utilized in so many different ways. So we're talking about replacing plastics. We're talking about using hemp, which is has what they call a low THC, and that's what gives you that euphoric effect to plants that have a higher THC, which is again more for those who are looking for a euphoric effect, and as well as a more direct medicinal purpose and use. So, hemp itself has a lot of uses. Dr. George Washington Carver Jr. was one of the first people who actually ever created a fuel, an alternative fuel from fossil fuels. And I know we're talking to, Gen Xers and millennial community. But when you think about the environment and the implications that lie ahead for these generations to figure out how they can use this plant to create a more sustainable planet, it is definitely through hemp. There's probably not anything that's more sustainable than it. And the reason that they call this plant a weed many times is because it grows very fast, particularly the low THC version or the hemp version. It grows very, very fast. And so it has the name of, or, it's being known as the word weed. And that's why it's called a weed. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty. That's a new fact.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't know about the cannabis MBA either. That sounded like a really interesting program. But Ari, did you want to jump in? Did you have a question?
Yeah. Well, I'm on the same page as Ashley. I've heard of a lot of people getting like certificates, as opposed to like full blown master's degrees in the study and the biology of cannabis. So that is super cool. First and foremost, congratulations on that. Where did you obtain it from?
So I started off at the University of the Science. University of Science is the first pharmaceutical school in our nation, and the first PhD in cannabis was received actually at the University of the Sciences in the early 1800s. Right. So again, this is nothing new. We've just had this gap of information for years. And so now it's bringing it back. And again, I live in Pennsylvania, and the University of Sciences was recently acquired by St. Joseph's University. And St. Joseph's University is a Catholic university, and they discontinued the program. Go
Hmm,
figure, right?
Boo.
Go figure,
I
right?
could see that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are several colleges throughout the United States that have higher degrees in cannabis. So I do know of one that's in Maryland. Here in Pennsylvania, we also have Thomas Jefferson University. Those two are MS programs.
Mm,
There's a new MBA program in New Jersey, and they do have some undergraduate programs as well that are more on the West Coast and in the Midwest. But
okay.
right,
Yes.
there are a lot of certificate programs available as well.
I wonder if the certificate makes it easier to sell or easier on the business end for clients. I did want to sort of talk about us specifically in DC, where weed is not illegal, but you can gift it to someone, you can't sell it to them. And so there's a lot of intricate practices that go into, what separates it from being money that can be taxed or not, being money that, is legal or not. And so I know that you are very involved in the legislation as well for cannabis usage. I wonder if you could talk to that and how that's affected mass incarceration rates for Black men specifically.
Yeah, so let's be clear. The war on drugs, a lot of times we talk about it as if it is a thing of the past. The war on drugs is still here. It's just been, they've just flipped the script, and it's just something else because, anything in our city, they did stop, um, really, so there was, I think it was a law where if there was a broken headlight, or a tail light, like they could stop the car, and if they smell something, then it's kind of like more of a reason for them to pursue it. But when you think about it, there are still people who are being arrested for cannabis, like right now, which is so ironic because when you look at it, there are like billions of dollars. I think there was like $15 billion in, from cannabis, in 2022, and each year it actually goes up even more. And so you look at one side and it's like, whoa, people are still being arrested. And then you look at the other side and it's like, whoa, people are paying college tuition, people are buying fancy cars and big houses. Like, this doesn't add up.
Mm.
So it's so important for us to be civically engaged, because many of the people who are legislating and who are creating these bills, they're not involved in cannabis. And so I know one of the things that I'm always encouraging young people to do is go to your legislator's office. Tell them the issues that you're having. I met a young lady who's a college professor, for instance, and because she had a prior as a younger person, it is now prohibiting her from actually buying a house. She can't get a loan to get a house. So we cannot continue to allow these type of things to happen in a country where it is legal. I always am remembered of this movie called The Amistad.
Oh,
And right, remember the Amistad? And so they went to court. We're going to go to court. We're going to fight for your rights. And he won. But then the lawyer was like, "You're free, but." And he didn't have that language in that wasn't something, a word that they had in their language. It was like yes or no. But here we have all this grayness in it, and that's what's happening in DC. It's
mm,
like it's legal, but, and so we want to encourage young people, and we want to encourage people overall to talk to your legislators. Let them know how these things are impacting their lives, and if they are not adhering to those messages, just get about 10 people, because they automatically know for every person that's about 10 votes.
mm.
Okay. The numbers add up. So I cannot express enough, don't give up. These people are working for us, and this is our taxpayer money that many times is going to lock people up. We need to make sure that our needs are being served. And I know you have a whole different issue there with statehood in DC, unfortunately. But here in Pennsylvania, we are in the Commonwealth, so we kind of almost in the same position. We can't vote on cannabis, but we can vote on the people who we want to have adult use. So that's how it works for us.
That's very interesting. We know you're at City Hall today. So can you talk to us about what you're doing there? And also shout out to Taryn. She just
Hi,
joined.
everybody. Really quick, I'm going to jump in before you answer the question about what's going on at City Hall, because I just wanted to talk about how the taboo around cannabis is very much rooted in racism. I mean, going all the way back to like 1800s, like 1920s, like prohibition time, it was all rooted in racism. It was disgusting. But one of my most like eye-opening moments, I watched a clip of a show recently. The show is called Adam Ruins Everything, and this show was Adam Ruins Drugs. And there's a quote that says, Scientists proved marijuana was not connected to insanity or violence in the 40s. And in 1973, a bipartisan government commission recommended Nixon decriminalize it. But Nixon being Nixon. Now, this next quote is, I put up on the screen, it's from Dan Baum, who was part of the Nixon administration. And he said, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did." I just wanted to jump on the screen, throw that out there to everybody, and see if you had any comments on that, because it was just so horrific to me that so many, specifically Black men, are incarcerated for something that the government has known is not a problem for almost 100 years now.
Yeah.
Right. No, and that is that's great, because it is again, I mentioned earlier about the lies and the untruth that we've been told about cannabis, about the plant. Really, it has no need in our lives, and so prohibition, and again moving it even farther to Nixon, who admired Harry Anslinger. And Harry Anslinger is from Pennsylvania, and he is one of those people who not only just went after people who were growing and utilizing like everyday people. He went after our stars. If you've ever seen, I think it's called Billie Holiday versus the U.S. or something, he went after her. He went after, I mean, Louis Armstrong, who we actually have a national stamp after, and all Louis Armstrong really wanted to do was be able to, to smoke in his own space, and it was important to him. And when you look at cannabis like you would any other pharmaceutical product, and what it can do to help relieve certain issues, and it's just a shame that our country has created a whole entire industry. The DEA came out of this, right? Like, that is something, like, there wasn't a DEA before the war on drugs. And so Nixon just really sealed the coffin with the nail with his anti-drug campaign. And yes, there were people who knew it. And there are still people who know it now, and they know where the bodies are buried. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of folks in our community who have been impacted. Not even just people, to be honest. There have been institutions, the Black Panthers, for instance, who actually had a clinic in Harlem. They knew about this. They knew that this was a war, and they were at war. And so in Harlem, they actually had a acupuncture clinic, and I talked to several other people who were there at the time, and they actually used cannabis as a way to, one, help people relieve the pain, but two, to get people off of the the addictions that they were confronted with, because they wanted to make sure that the community was clean. And so we're having these conversations again as if they're like totally new conversations. But I personally think that anyone who was legally and politically involved should really like they should really have some type of what's the word I'm trying to use? Uh, they should be able to pay these communities back. So
Restitution.
financially, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, restitution, because they hounded these communities. And like I said, when once the DEA came in, I mean, it was like like almost game over. And so to know that these things happened, and like I said, it's not over because they're still happening, because the government and law enforcement don't have enough information, nor do they have enough tools to understand what's regulated and what's not regulated. So the Farm Bill Act regulated hemp products look just like other cannabis products with high THC. They come in vape pens, they come in flour, they come in pre rolls, they come in all these things, but law enforcement doesn't know. And I know for a fact that they are still busting down doors because they think that people are working with a Schedule 1 instead of working with something that was regulated by the farm bill.
I
So
just heard recently that Biden is trying to get marijuana off being a Schedule 1 drug. Have you heard anything about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, so that is what you call descheduling. And so people talk about two things, the descheduling and the rescheduling. And the reason again for that is because it is an industry and it is growing, and it's an industry that both local as well as federal government sees that can really help to benefit communities. And so when you think about what does rescheduling or descheduling look like? It looks like now any other regulated product that you would use. About, I think it was in 2019, I actually had the fortune of being invited to the UN to speak to the UN just about that, just about rescheduling cannabis, because um, once the UN criminalized cannabis, then all the other nations, because we have to understand again, this is a plant that was used millions of years ago. In ancient Kemet, they have it on the pyramid walls and in the papyrus, and they tell you how it was used. That's one great thing about the ancient Egyptians. They pretty much wrote down everything. That is one of the things that they wrote down. And so all over really the world, there was some use of cannabis throughout history. But when the UN actually followed behind Nixon in the United States, then that's when it became dangerous and outlawed around the world. And now we see what is happening with just the importation of cannabis, and now even more illicit drugs, period, into the United States.
So, a quick question for you, because I know that, of course, the Chicken Box, when we have our usual host, is a multi generational show. And a lot of older folks, despite being able to benefit from cannabis, are very apprehensive of using it. We've seen it be beneficial to people who have cancer, simply stuff like body aches. You rub a little something on it and things could get better. But because of the stigma that's attached to it, a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, but Black people especially, are like, as they call it, because we were talking about the different names for it earlier, no, I'm not using that dope. My great grandmother specifically, she has glaucoma, and we kind of kid about like, oh, if we just gave her a little something, like she'd be okay, we'll help her out. But like, we know that she's not willing to go for it. Knowing what we know now with Taryn's information, with speaking to you, as well as just modern science, and as it continues to be reported about the fact that marijuana is in fact a lot more helpful than it is made to be harmful. How do we break that stigma so that Black people can benefit off of it? I know the biggest thing with Black Cannabis Week is you educating people, elevating it, and providing opportunities for Black people. How can we step away from this idea that it's going to continue to incarcerate us, or better yet, cause us harm, and get into it so that we can truly utilize it and benefit from it?
Yeah, so one of the ways is something like what we're doing right now during Black Cannabis Week, which is elevating the conversation and really putting it on Front Street. Um, and I laugh because, Dr. Woodson, who created Black History Week, and that week went on to become now a whole month. And obviously, we celebrated 365. But the reason that it was created, because it was like, whoa, people don't know their history. And so Black Cannabis, we just really falls in that same vein, is that we want people to know what cannabis really is because of the lies that we've been told all these years about what cannabis is to somebody else, right? Not to us. And last year, we actually had a Ghanaian professor who talked about cannabis, and he talked about how, because people, if you were caught in the field, you had to take whatever you had. And some of the people actually had seeds, and they brought some of those seeds over, and this is some of the medicine that they would partake upon. But I think really just being able to lead people to safe spaces, and that's what we do at our in-person conference. We have it at Temple University Medical School. It is a very safe space where people can actually talk to professionals. I originally wanted to have the conference at a church, and I wanted to have it at a church because I said, where do you find the majority of Black people? It's either going to be at the church, at the doctor's office, or with the politician. And so we chose to actually, the church was very close, and then they said no. And so my next step was to go to a politician. I went to State Senator Sharif Street, and he was like, wow, this is a great idea. Let's do it. And so we've been partnering with him every year to do this. And so when people see when they see folks coming to their communities and the places that they're familiar with, I think that's where we can start the conversation. You mentioned earlier rubbing creams and all of that kind of stuff, and it's funny. Somebody told me a story about something that they had at a community center, and everybody in the community center was upset. Like, oh, they're gonna be talking about weed in a community center. Well, I'm gonna go anyway. So they go, and they have like the little reflexologists and hand massages and the chair massages. And she said, like after 15 minutes of getting CBD oil rubbed on their hands and their backs and so on, everybody was happy. Like, oh, tell us more. And so, yeah, we had to
I
meet.
do think CBD is probably like the connection to the older crowd.
Yeah.
Starting them off low and slow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, welcome back, everybody, to the Chicken Box, sponsored by the Afro, Maryland's oldest Black-owned business, 131 years, just last month. Happy birthday to the Afro. Cherron, we seem to have lost your camera feed. Can you see us still? Oh,
Let
look, there you are. You're back.
Oh, there she is.
I think my phone just died. So sorry, man. Not
That's okay. That's
yeah.
okay.
So sorry about that. But yeah. So well, I'm glad to be back on camera now.
we're glad to have your gorgeous face again.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I just want to
So,
say how
go
important
ahead.
to have the intergenerational conversations. I tell people when they know that I'm advocating for cannabis and cannabis consumption, a lot of people are shocked because I come from this wellness world, and I have to tell them it is no different. The reason that I am in this space is because I want our communities to achieve the wellness. So if that is repairing the communities by putting taxation into our schools, into our community centers, into families who have been harmed, if that is the wellness of being able to have a job that you really want to be in, and if that job includes cannabis, then let us help you find that, because some people are suffering because they're working jobs, but they like to consume cannabis, and they wish that they could do that. So at the conference, we actually have a whole career fair. We want to meet people where they are, because when we go to other communities, they already know about this. And I actually really think that a lot of it has been that it has affected us so much. Like some of us are, you're talking like generations of people who haven't had a man in the house. You're talking people, we have our advisory board leader who every man in her family has been locked up from cannabis. We have someone else um, who's working with us on our advisory board. Her father, he was released, and she bought him some, some socks so that he can start going out on the street and start making some money himself. Well, one of those pair of socks happened to be cannabis socks. Do you know they put him back in jail for violating probation for having socks? I know it sounds crazy. For having socks with a leaf on it. We like to say all plants matter, including this plant. And just to have like a leaf on something to send somebody back to jail who had already been locked up for 25 years. And and the daughter was just trying to help him so that he could now start making money on his own. So the stigma is so wide and so real that even just a picture of a leaf can send somebody back to jail or to jail.
That's insane.
These intergenerational conversations are important. I like to say what I'm doing is for the grandmas and the aunties, because if the grandmas and the aunties said, "Baby, it's it's okay if you go to that dispensary. It's okay if you work over here. It's okay if you go to school and you learn how to do this." But as long as we have these divisions in our households, from the aunties and the grandmas and the mas, our young people are never going to feel comfortable. It's going to be you over here and me over there. Just this morning on the ride over, somebody was telling me a young lady was in high school, and she was caught with a, not caught because she was on social media with a vape pen, and she was a great dance lead for the dance team. They've cut her off of the dance team. They've kicked her out of school. And I was like, did anybody talk to this young lady? Has anybody talked? Because she's obviously screaming out for more help. So we need to support our children instead of cutting them off from their families, cutting them off from their communities because of cannabis. Because the only
Mhm.
reason that she's really interested in cannabis because she's trying to heal for something. And so we know that the traumas are real,
Yeah.
and it's a way that people, we like to call it self-medication. And so we know that there are a lot of people out here who have to self-medicate. I've never seen anyone murdered. I've never been without my father my whole life. I don't know the trauma of those people. And I cannot take away from them that is keeping them sane and keeping them the great people that they are. And so we have to kind of, step back a little bit and not just be in you know, this mode of persecution, but be in a more supportive mode. And I am not, like, for instance, when alcohol became legal and growing up, it was legal, it was never really in my household. I'm not a drinker. But do I mind going to the bar? No, I don't mind. I'll go to the bar and any day just to hang out and to be social. And so we have to sort of start moving around to understand, for a lot of people, they need cannabis. And so what that is for you may not be for me, right? And so just because it's not for me does not mean that we have to abhor it, we have to reject it and reject the people who utilize the plant.
Absolutely. I love that you said, it just because it's not for you doesn't mean that it's not for me or vice versa. I think my biggest thing that I talk to people about a lot of different stuff is that somebody else having the choice doesn't take away your choice to not participate in it. But I did want to talk to you also about the necessity of marijuana, but also kind of like the cultural aspect of it. I think that in the Black community, especially, it has played a key role kind of in certain dynamics. You see movies like Friday or songs like I Got Five on it. I had a conversation with somebody who brought something to my attention that was very interesting. They noted that oftentimes white people will talk business over drinks, while Black people might do it over cannabis. And so, can you talk to me about the cultural significance for those who are kind of pro, or better yet, just not entirely against marijuana, what it means to the Black community, especially in a week during Black Cannabis Week? I think that, like I said, there have been lots of instances of it playing a key role in our life, whether it be in our entertainment, our actual life dynamics, the way that people have benefited from it, the way that it's affected us, and not such a negative way, such as mass incarceration, but just, can you talk about the cultural ties between cannabis and Black people?
Oh yeah, I mean the cultural ties are deep. Like I said, this is a plant that stretches throughout the whole entire diaspora. You hear me? Not like a part of it, but the whole entire diaspora. And it is a plant that has really helped a lot of communities and a lot of people make it to the next day. I remember I had a plumber in my house once, and it's probably time for the conference, and I probably mentioned it, and I wasn't expecting what he said. He was like, "Oh yeah, I'll go in my basement and I'll smoke. I don't mess with nobody." He said, "But if I didn't have this, I would probably go upstairs and kill my whole entire family." This is what he said to me. I didn't know this man from a can of paint. And so a lot of people, they utilize it as a way, as for coping, and it is something that has been traditional. I met a woman, an elder, who was at the conference, and she said that her grandma used to give her a pillow, send a pillow up from the south every month because she had some kind of respiratory issue. And so the pillow allowed, she laid on that pillow and she could sleep at night. And she said it wasn't until she went to college that she realized what was actually in that pillow. So these traditional ways and uses of, right, exactly. So
Grandma was slick with it.
like, could you imagine? Like, oh, that's what grandma was giving me. So,
I wish my grandma had given me some of that.
so yeah, so these traditional, so people knew is what I'm saying, right? And that's something that's cultural. And then so as we emerge on the 50th year of hip hop. Hip hop wasn't supposed to like last. This was supposed to be just like this little street, little, like, oh, that's what they doing over there kind of thing. Hip hop is still here today, and it is a global phenomenon. And the reason that hip hop is still here is because it's more than just a record. It's more than just one one person singing a song. It is a culture. And so cannabis is the same way. It is a culture. And a lot of cannabis has been infused into the hip hop community. And again, it is a way for people, again, to be creative. That's what Louis Armstrong used it for. And he talks about that in his autobiography. And I believe that if if Billie Holiday had lived, she would have been able to utilize cannabis to take her off of heroin. But these are the things that are not discussed, and as long as we continue to have this prohibition mindset, safety is at risk because we want people to be safe. The things that they're putting in plant medicine now is dangerous. I mean, you name it, they're putting it in there. And so the more we sort of bring an acceptance to it, it's just like alcohol. People used to die from trying to make alcohol in the back room. I actually, as a
People
young,
still die from that.
right, yeah.
You got corn stills exploding down in Kentucky and stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and I've actually seen, which is probably why I was never a drinker. I actually bought a bottle of corn liquor
Oof.
explode as a child.
Ugh.
And the uncle who made it, he was blind anyway. So so he probably didn't have business making it. Okay. But this was his sustenance. This is how he made money. But anyway, culturally, it does serve a has significant meaning in many cultures. You look at the Rastafari culture; they use it for traditional faith-based practices. They're not the only ones. There are cultures all over the world that actually use it for ceremony. And so when you look at this plant, and even just because when I mentioned I was invited to the UN, there was only there were only two communities in the whole entire world that were actually able to utilize cannabis, and one which was in Ethiopia, and the other one which was in India, because it was a cultural practice and they were able to keep that cultural practice there. So, again, we do need to look at the cultural practices and benefits, and I'm sure as it continues to become more accepted and regulated, we will be able to learn more about those cultural practices, because the prohibition, I'm telling you, it took a bite out of it.
Now, there are a lot of also medical benefits that you discussed earlier. I wanted to share for the people listening that Black Cannabis Week is going to be on the campus of Temple University, hosted in association with their School of Medicine. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's actually, yeah, there's called the Lewis Katz School of Medicine.
Okay.
That's 3500 North Broad Street. So it's north of the main Temple campus.
Okay.
Do we
So
have the
for
attendance
people,
for that?
Oh, repeat that?
Could we have like the dates for it? I know that it's a week long, and so when people
Yeah.
participate,
hmm Yeah, so today is actually our last virtual. That ends at 1 o'clock, and people can find that on our YouTube channel, which is Black Cannabis Week. And the conference itself is on Friday. That's when we have our policy day. Earlier, I talked about civic engagement. That's how important it is that we put this on Front Street. So instead of people going to our state capital, we're bringing our state capital to the people. So we have, you know, we have about 5 different local legislators who have really made strides and steps. We start off with a private breakfast, and that breakfast would actually have those people who would be implementing the laws, because again, we talked about law enforcement and some of the thoughts and behaviors and beliefs that they still have about the plant, like they're enforcing something from 1975, and it's not that anymore. So we want, not that we're inviting law enforcement, so but I just want to say other departments, Department of Health, you have to think about it. If you're a mom and you're utilizing cannabis, your child can possibly be at jeopardy in jeopardy of being taken from you. We're talking to folks who are from the housing department. If you live in public housing and you are utilizing cannabis, that's a reason for you to get kicked out of public housing. We have the insurance and regulations that will be coming. Compliance. So we have a lot of different agencies that are coming to this breakfast, and we're bringing in very, very important thought leaders and experts to again share with them. We're doing it in a Khalil Gibran the Prophet method. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book, but yeah, it's a classic. But anyway, he washes up on these shores, and it's all the people there, and they're asking him questions. So we're sort of doing this in that same vein. So speak to the people of insurance, speak to the people of child custody. So speak to the people, and so each one of these presenters will actually speak to this audience, and then we'll move over to the main medical campus at 3500 North Broad Street, and that's where we will have our panelists and vendors, and people can just learn more. And one important thing that I want to say about both days, is Friday and Saturday, is that they are free. There is no cost to attend this. On Saturday, we have three pathways, which is wellness, entrepreneurship, and one which is called WISE, because we always, always, always include an intergenerational conversation around cannabis. So, and that's what that pathway would be. So we're just excited that people are excited and people want to learn more, hear more. And I think, again, this is just a really great, safe place for people to do that, for people to network, and for people just to learn more. So everybody from the novice to the experts.
That's amazing. I'm really glad that we're getting the tea on all of this information about Black Cannabis Week. I also wanted to dive a little bit into a different question, or I guess a different perspective of cannabis. I wanted to ask whether or not you think the drug can also sometimes be abused or sometimes overused. I mean, to compensate for, other situations, and what you've seen of that and its impact on the Black community too.
Yeah, so that, again, education.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know how many drinks you can drink. Some people do.
Mm-hmm.
You know how much food you can eat. Some people do. If you can't, then it becomes an issue. And if it becomes an issue, then you need to seek expert help.
Right.
And that's what we see in cannabis, is that there is a lot of that you have cannabis doctors now. There are doctors who are specifically trained on the endocannabinoid system, right? And so people overutilize or don't know when to stop because there's a problem. And
Mm-hmm.
so hopefully those folks will actually know. And I know people who they'll say, "Oh, this is my sabbatical period." They'll take a month off or 2 months off, just to kind of, you know, like understand, like, hey, this is where I am. And so, and it's the same with, I think, anything, when you know that an addiction is real. But I think that the major thing is people being able to have a safe product, people to be able to be safe with that product, and people just really knowing when enough is enough. And some people, the only way that they know that is because they go to a professional to, one, understand what type of product that they actually need, and two, how much of that they actually need. And so this is when you start really elevating the conversation to know what will help you, because at the end of the day, it's all about this person becoming well. And I know people who have actually consumed for a specific issue, just like they would any other type of pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
Once that issue has been relieved, then they don't need it anymore. And some people are fine with that. When we talk about overusage, what does that look like for some people? It's going to be different across the board. I know people who wake up and go to sleep, like they just simply cannot function, and it's not a bad thing. I have a friend, he's a MD. As a matter of fact, he's head of his department, and he smokes every day. He goes to work. um, and so we, again, as we talk about stigma, if you met somebody and they said that they smoked every day or they consumed cannabis every day, you would probably think, oh, you don't have a house in the Hamptons. Oh, you don't have, this kind of car or this type of education. No.
A status thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we think, and I think because we visually see certain people consuming cannabis, we see that as the picture, and not understanding that it's all kinds of faces, it's all kinds of economic religious backgrounds. There's like all kinds of people who function and who function well and who function better with cannabis.
There's so many different types of strain too. You have indica, you have sativa, and I know that you were talking about how different types can be prescribed for different things. But I also learned through your bio that you have you did have a shop with your daughter that you ran during COVID. So I wanted to ask, is it still around? Can people still go there and still buy products there, or what's
Yeah.
going on?
So we do have an award-winning plant shop called Plant and People,
Yeah.
and it is, in one day I would like to sell actual cannabis plants in there for people to buy, but
Mhm.
right now we are focusing on house plants. And part of the reasoning is just really to help people become more in tune with plants. So again, I mentioned I'm a wellness advocate first. And no matter what that is coming through, I find a lot of times, or at least in my life, it has come through a plant. And so, if that's a plant that we're talking about today, cannabis, or if it's a monstera plant, we want to make sure that people know what it is and that people understand how to take care of it. Because the more you kind of, center your life around, or your wellness around plants, is it's more synergistic. And so, and I know plants aren't for everybody, but the aspect of just really caring for something, and particularly caring for something that's close to nature, because I say if people understood like the importance from a very young age of what it means to take care of plant life, then they won't go out and litter and destroy the planet, destroy other people. They are more they're just really more in tune. And so that's what we're trying to create at Plant and People. We do carry CBD products for people, and some leaf, everything from a silk scarf to socks to, you know, yeah, to any of those little things that people are interested in. And so, again, we respect all plants. All plants. We have a T-shirt at our shop, and it says "All plants matter," and,
Aw.
and so, and they really do. And that plant should not be treated any differently from any other plant that we sell and grow in our shop.
That's very true. Well, ladies, I don't know if you guys have any other questions, but that was all for me. It was amazing to have you on an episode of the Chicken Box. We really appreciate it. Right now, I want to welcome everybody to get on the box and share just the fact that they had today that they enjoyed, or something about their life that relates to this topic that we're talking about, or any topic that you want. I'll get on the box first and share that I have two houseplants. One is named Bobby and the other one is named Whitney. And so they get along very well. And I enjoy plant. Yes, they make me happy. So I want to definitely come to Philly, definitely get a plant at your shop and add to my little collection, my little family here. That's my time on the box. I appreciate you sharing about Cannabis Week. I learned so many new things. I'm going to look into a cannabis MBA. That's another fact that I want to take with me from today. But I'll toss it to you, Miss Sharon.
Yeah, so again, we want to invite everybody to sign up for our newsletter. So, um, this Cannabis Opportunities Conference is just one of the things that we we do. We are gearing up for our HBCU tour again for 2024. But most importantly, go to the website. That's Black Cannabis Week. That's blackcannabisweek.com, as well as Black Cannabis Week, which is also on our YouTube channel. Join this, because this is a global movement. This is not just about Pennsylvania or Philadelphia. This is about how we can connect globally. We're looking forward to 2024 and just really having more conversations like this, and with people like you. It's it's so important. It's just important to our communities that we learn more and we understand what this is and what it is not.
Amen.
That's a good one.
Aria, you're on the box.
I'm on the box. First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for all the information that you provided us today and your expertise. I think that breaking the stigma that is around cannabis, as we have learned is the proper term for it, is super duper important just because we as a demographic and as a race, obviously it's affected us for so long in such a negative way, but I think it is time that we liberate ourselves and that we allow it to affect us in a positive way. Taking away from this, what I want to do is figure out how, of course, I can collaborate and use cannabis with culinary. I know that's a really big industry. So, Ms. Cherron, we're going to be in contact for sure. But yes, just thank you so much for your expertise and for letting us know the history behind it and furthermore, the future that lies ahead of it. I think that there's great things that lie within cannabis.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being on the show. I'm going to wrap it up by being on the box, saying hi to all of our viewers out there: Jennifer, Laura, Sybil, Muhaddamida. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
Muhammad,
there you go, Muhammida. There, sorry. But we appreciate everybody's input. Cherron, we had a blast with you. We learned so much today. I think what I'm going to take away from the episode is that it's really important that we start focusing. Oh, we lost her. I think her battery died on her phone, everybody. But I'll finish out by saying I think it's really important that we focus on mental health as opposed to incarceration when it comes to dealing with drug problems. I would love to see, I know the Last Prisoner Project is out there working to get every single last person incarcerated out of the system and, get some of the restitution truly that they deserve. We appreciate everybody for being on the show. Aria, thank you for joining us. Ashley, as usual, your wonderful host. And we'll see everybody back next week with Dr. Draper and Impeccable. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.